Hey, before I introduce Doug, there's a little note card in everybody's cup holder, and this is just a way for you to express your support for the Great Burn proposed wilderness area. This summer, I took a group of veterans through there from the Hoodoo Pass trailhead down to Heart Lake and then down again to the Heart Lake trailhead. It was just a really remarkable landscape. So, if you want, at the end, we're going to pass a hat around to collect these. If you don't have a pen, borrow one from somebody next to you and fill it out, and we'll get that protected. All right, tonight we're here to listen to. Sorry, my name's Tristan Persko, by the way. I'm the Veteran Outreach Coordinator for the Montana Wilderness Association. And tonight we're here to listen to Doug Peacock talk about the wounds of war and the importance of wilderness and everything and dealing with that. Doug's a disabled Vietnam veteran, and he was a Green Beret medic. And he was the real-life model for Edward Abbey's George Washington Hayduke. He was published widely on wilderness issues, ranging from grizzly bears to buffalo, from everywhere down to the Sonoran Desert all the way up to British Columbia, and then even out of the country in Siberia and Nepal, working with tigers and blue sheep. He's got a few really good books. I've recently finished reading this one, Walking It Off, and it was awesome. But his other books include Grizzly Ears, In Search of the American Wilderness, Baja, Walking It Off, I just mentioned, and The Essential Grizzly, The Mingled Fates of Men and Bears. That's the next one I want to read. In 2007, Doug was named a Guggenheim Fellow, and in 2011, he was again named a Lannan Fellow for his work on archaeology, climate change, and the peopling of North America, published in 2013. As in the Shadow of the Saber-Tooth, a renegade naturalist considers global warming, the arrival of the first Americans, and terrible beasts of the Pleistocene. He lectures regularly about wilderness and veterans issues, which we're here to talk about tonight, often at schools including the Hotchkiss School, California Academy of the Sciences, Scotts Community College in Iowa, Texas A&M, Middlebury College, University of Minnesota, Ohio University, and right here at the University of Montana. Doug was the subject of a feature film about grizzlies and Vietnam, kind of pretty interesting combination, I think. It's called Peacock's War, which premiered on PBS's Nature and the Discovery Channel. And for this, he won the grand prizes at the Telluride Mountain Film and the Snowboard Film Festivals. And he's appeared a lot of other places like Good Morning America, NBC Evening News, man, Sesame Street. That's the one you're best known for, right? Yeah. Today we're going to do the letter D. Anyways, Doug, thanks a lot for coming. I'm glad to get off of here and let you finish it up.
Thanks, Tristan. And thanks so much for the Montana Wilderness Association for all the work they've done, and especially Tristan in throwing this together. I've really enjoyed this work. I'm getting to know a younger generation of warrior, and it's just been so good for me. That's what I've been doing most of this year. It's kind of a default position, you know. If you don't die on schedule, you know, you're in danger of ending up being an elder, you know. So watch it, you know. Anyway, I love this time of year. It's just a fine fall night, and it's the most glorious time of year to be almost any place. But I just been visiting up in Glacier, mainly in this last week. Been up on the east side. I checking in with my heroes. A couple of them came tonight, Lou Bruno and Jack Gladstone. I'm just, yeah. And, you know, I want to report that up there on the Blackfeet, all the bears I saw were fat, very fat, with the exception of Jack, who's just very big and sturdy, okay? I want to make that clear. Okay. And on the west side, the larches are all in color. We found a few, late white chanterelles up there, and and on the east side in Blackfoot country, I didn't get up there this year, but way up on top of the ledges, that are flat top mountains, over on the east side. It's originally accompanied mountain sheep biologist about 30 years ago, and we'd walk these high flat ridges that are way above timberline, and all of a sudden you'd see a pile of rocks, like a circle of rocks, and obviously man-made. And, it turns out there's quite a few of them up there, and they're just in the most remarkable, inaccessible places. And, early anthropologists and called them sleeping circles. And it's been widely used, But anybody who's seen those things and where they are, you ain't going to get a very good sleep in one of those things. They're not sleeping circles at all. And what they are, ceremonial places where perhaps people went to fast and have vision quest. Last weekend, I was down in Canyonland country, down in the San Juan River and bottom of Cedar Mesa. Again, it was a vets group, and of course I know that, I'm sort of nomadic. I've spent about 7 months out of the year chasing grizzlies, and when they go to sleep, I have to go down and get my desert hit, and that's one of the places I've been going for the last 40 years. Edward Abbey first took me into the Canyonlands, just a couple of years out of Vietnam, and introduced me to that country, and I've been going back ever since. And this was. I helped lead. It's a Wounded Vets in the Wilderness program, and this is co-sponsored in this case by the BLM and by the Sierra Club. But I mean, these young men and women are so impressive, and they're. I can remember just coming back and having all that latent energy and being really, really angry and wanting to focus that anger on, something positive, a noble war worth fighting, and that's really what they're looking for now. So, the potential is just immense. And all the vets did a traditional Navajo sweat, and I took one too, and sweats are greatly needed by some of us who have, daily impure thoughts and live filthy lives. So I never pass one up, I'm always in there, I need a lot of those things. The site is on, where we were is on Sand Island. It's near Bluff. And again, what I'm edging away is the use of ceremony. And, Bluff is on one of the holy roads. Chaco is a religious center in northern New Mexico in the middle of no place. And out of Chaco run these, they call them roads, they're the roads, and they run, and a lot of them were just unveiled in the last 20 years with, with satellite infrared photography where they could trace them. And they're straight as an arrow. And they go all the way up in Colorado, and there's a great kiva up there. One of them runs right to Bluff. There's a great kiva there. And, and again, our culture basically founded on greed, thought these roads were, commerce. The purpose was for commerce, that's what anthropologists labeled them. But when in fact, these are holy roads, these are holy roads that take you to a sacred place. And, what I'm edging towards is the use of ceremony, because if you were, and the traumas of this world are so commonplace now, they're not confined to returning soldiers, the men and women coming back from war. They're all over the place, and there's as much need for healing in this world as, and it's going to, it's that need is going to grow with the years, and I'm going to talk about some of that tonight, because when my culture doesn't provide ceremonies, I mean, if we were a Navajo veteran coming back from a Middle Eastern war, we'd we'd probably undergo the warrior's way. There'd be a ceremony involved. And the Blackfeet and other people, take care of their warriors when they go beyond and have seen beyond, and they embrace them in a cultural structure that really we don't have. So I've kind of gone throughout my life. I sort of make things up as I go. In the last 2 months, we've celebrated 2 anniversaries, and on 9/11, I was over at Billings giving another vets talk, actually. And a little bit before then, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act. And I'm going to have to have a little drink here. And, the ritual observance in celebration of anniversaries is one definition of ceremony. And, wilderness is the other key value. I've lived all my life in the wilderness. I wouldn't know what to do without it. Since Vietnam, every spare minute I get. And, it's the quality of wildness is important. Wildness is the quality that lives in every man and woman. And going out into the wilderness is one way of finding it, and I have a friend who can find humility before nature in his backyard watching ants, and that's just fine. Myself, I need herds of grizzlies roaming over vast regions of tundra. But, I've just found that nature, what they call so much in the trade, wilderness-based healing was the phrase that the professionals down in Salt Lake were talking about. I don't quite know what the hell that means, but it's a two-way street. You go into the wilderness, and maybe it saves your life, but it's a two-way street. There's a payback. Payback. The notion of payback is coined in Vietnam, especially. You get something, you give something back. In my case, the defense of that wilderness is the other, is the other side of the coin. I mean, you get, what you need from it, but it's not going to be there unless you fight like hell for it. And that's I've been chipping away at that for 50 years now, and that's not going to change. Going out into the wild, probably the most important thing you can take with you is simply an open mind. And, you leave behind whatever, gadgets or toys that interfere with becoming part of something larger than yourself. I think that's the key, a web of part of an older, more finished world. I find it's really helpful to have a few, commonly called man-eaters, but I can guarantee you they're equal opportunity. I like a few tigers or grizzlies or polar bears in my wilderness, but the ants are all right too. Anyway, I'm going to get back to this later. The last book I wrote, if I have time and I get around to it, is it's In the Shadow of the Saber-Tooth. It's Global Warming, the Origins of the First Americans, and the Terrible Beasts of the Pleistocene. And the first ritual or ceremony that we know of that happened on this continent was the burial of a 1.5-year-old child near Wilson, Montana, about 13,000 years ago, and the child was ritually buried with sacred red ochre and 100 of magnificent mammoth hunting tools and butchering tools. And I've been working on that story for over a decade. Okay, here. And I'll read, if I get time, I'll read a few short paragraphs from here. It's a book that took a lot of research. These other books are, called memoirs, and the neat thing about a memoir is, you don't have to worry about letting a lot of unimportant facts get in the way of a good story. If something happened in April or June, hell, it doesn't really matter. You can't tell whoppers, but you can tell little ones. Well, in this bloody book, I couldn't write a sentence without looking something up, and it dragged on for 5, 6, 7 years, I think, before I rewrote it. So, anyway, and I'm going to tell some stories and read a little bit, and I got a little bit of historic grizzly film footage. It's just raw stuff, that I shot a long time ago. Back in the Pleistocene, when my basic movie camera unit for filming grizzlies weighed 98 pounds, and now they got these things that are big as a pencil and they're better, Anyway, it was another time. And, for me to talk about the importance of ceremony in wilderness in the healings of the wounds of war is merely for me to tell my own unremarkable story. And when I got back from Vietnam in 1968, like a lot of other vets, I was just out of sorts. I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't be around anybody. I was just no good around people. And this is not a time when, I'm kind of a loner anyway, but, there wasn't a lot of vets outreach back in 1968. You didn't wear your uniform down the street, that's for sure. The one thing I was very comfortable with, however, is being in the wild, camping out. I grew up in Michigan. My dad was a Boy Scout organizer, and he took me along on all his Boy Scout trips. I was too little to be a Boy Scout, so he just cut me loose, and I'd run loose in the woods, and I'd paddle canoes and catch turtles and fish, and I had a swamp that helped me survive adolescence. A great wildlife refuge now, and it was my feathery Serengeti with thousands upon thousands of whistling swans and geese and ducks of all kinds. And so when I got back from Vietnam and really couldn't be around anybody, I just collected up my camping gear, bought a Jeep, and started. By then the Rocky Mountains were my home. So I started out late in May. There was still snow in the deep mountains. I started to make my way north, and I carried a road map with me all the time I was in Vietnam, just a little stupid road map, and it basically just had Montana and Wyoming in it. But I'd get that out, and and some nights, I remember nights in team houses and remote outposts called A camps in Vietnam. I'd look at that map and I kind of fly over, like a giant buzzard of some kind, and I look at the blank spots mostly, and I wonder what was down in that basin, or what was around that creek with a hot spring steaming away, and I had a talisman, an arrowhead that someone gave me, and the arrowhead protected me from enemy bullets, most of them anyway. And the map told me what I wanted to stay alive for. And so that's where I headed. I headed to the blank spots on the map. I got up to the Wind Rivers in late June. There's still heavy snow up there. It was crazy, but I was determined to get into the east side of the Winds, which is one of the wettest, coldest ecosystems in the lower 48. I mean, the glaciers there are bigger than any place but Mount Baker, and there's a reason for that, And after 3 or 4 soggy weeks in the Wind Rivers, I came down with a malaria attack, which is, not out of the common. I had 3 or 4 back here. The Yankee doctors didn't know what the hell to make of it when I had one in Massachusetts, but, I knew what was coming on. And I knew I had to get the hell out of there and go someplace. Yellowstone is pretty close by, and Yellowstone, compared to the Wind Rivers, is relatively flat, and the climate's a hell of a lot better. And I had this malaria attack coming on, so I knew a little bit about Yellowstone. I was going to go into this area where there are hot springs and, soak in the hot springs. And and regain my health. And if I can't find this, I can just read it anyway. Well, anyway, rather than look for the passage in here, I'll just tell this story. Anyway, so I found an area with a hot creek. It started out really hot from a big boiling hot spring, ended up tepid, so you could go up or down, get any temperature you wanted in there. And I was in a pretty hot section, a little bathtub, not very big creek. It's like that wide, and but I was sitting in there. It's October by then, and the hot water's running over my neck, and I'm imagining that I'm getting stronger and getting better, sweating out the bad spirits, and I'd seen a lot of grizzly sign around. I knew bear tracks, but I really didn't know anything about grizzlies, and at that time, and I caught some movement out of the corner of my eye, and across the meadow was a mother grizzly with 2 yearling cubs about 200 feet away. And, I didn't know anything about grizzlies except you weren't supposed to get close to mothers with cubs. So even though they're yearling cubs, I just figured I had to do something. And I decided I was going to climb a tree. There was a lodgepole pine tree just right on the edge of this little bank. And I've written about this probably better, and I've told this story before. But anyway, I decided I was going to climb this tree when the bears weren't looking at me. So I waited, and the bears had their backs, and all of a sudden I stood up, and the whirlpool-like effect of the hot water made me black out, and I was dizzy, but I was terrified too. So, and I slammed into this pine tree. It's a little lodgepole tree, and I just slammed into it, cut a huge gash in my forehead, and the blood's just coming down. But I was so terrified. I made it up to the top of this little lodgepole tree, and I'm right up in the top like this, perched. And I discovered that the tree itself isn't much bigger than a Christmas tree. And, it's about maybe, I mean, really. And there I am up there. And it's cold. The wind is blowing like hell, and I'm buck naked, and I'm bleeding. And those bears come around and pretend to eat grass, sometimes 15 or 20 feet from me looking down, blue, naked, and bleeding. And they never even looked at me. They knew I was there the whole time. And, I was perched up there like some silly species of Oriole bird or something. Anyway, those bears got my attention. A couple of weeks after that, okay, then let's see here. I'm just going to read a little bit from grizzly years here. And so, that was my introduction to grizzlies. And in this area, there were a lot of grizzlies. It turns out that was the year that Yellowstone closed the dumps, and there had been a dump in the area. That's why there's so many grizzlies around, and they form a social hierarchy like they do on salmon streams, or any place there's abundant food, to tell you the truth. And at the top of this, top of this hierarchy was this great big male grizzly. It's pretty dark grizzly. And when he came in, he just, all the other bears avoided him, ran away. And so I was in the back country, kind of making my way, a few miles east of my camp, up the Nez Perce route, up that direction. And I was coming into a meadow, a little defile, a little narrow meadow, a little size of this auditorium, but a little narrower. And here comes this big black grizzly coming the other way. So I'm going to read this. I froze. The grizzly paused, catching my movement, then lowered his head slightly, and, with a sort of stiff-legged gait, ambled towards me, swinging his head from side to side. I knew from having watched this bear interact with other animals that the worst thing I could do was run. The big bear stopped 30 feet of me. I slowly worked my hand into the bag and gradually pulled out the magnum. Actually, at first I carried a piece. That was the last day, incidentally, that I carried a piece some 40 years ago. However, I peered down the gun barrel into the dull red eyes of the huge grizzly. He gnashed his jaws and lowered his ears. The hair on his hump stood up. We stared at each other for what might have been seconds, but felt like hours. I knew once again that I was not going to pull the trigger. My shooting days were over. I lowered the pistol. The giant bear flicked his ears and looked off to the side. I took a step backward and turned my head towards the trees. I felt something pass between us. The grizzly slowly turned away from me with grace and dignity and swung into the timber at the end of the meadow. I caught myself breathing heavily again, the flush of blood hot on my face. I felt my life had been touched by enormous power and mystery. I didn't know then that the force of that encounter would shape my life for decades to come. Tracking grizz would become full-time work for 6 months of many years, and lingers yet at the heart of any annual story I tell of my life. I have never questioned the route this journey took. It seems a single trip, the sole option, driven by that same potency that drew me into grizzly country in the beginning. I returned to camp and kindled a fire, tended it into the night. I threw a pile of lodgepole twigs on the embers and poked at it with a stick. I thought about my old road map and the huge brown grizzly. In Vietnam, the primary predator was man. If I had salvaged a grain of wisdom from the agonies of combat, it had nothing to do with the knowledge of killing or of waging war. There was no enlightenment in homicide. What was burned deepest into my consciousness was the little acts of grace, lessons that had lain dormant in memory and now were retrieving themselves from anesthetized corners of my brain. It never mattered why. The grinding of quarter itself was a transcendence. The grizzly radiated potency. He carried the physical strength and thorniness of disposition that allowed him to attack or kill most any time he cared. But, almost always, he chose not to. That was power beyond a bully's swaggering. It was a kind of restraint that commands awe, a muscular act of grace. When I was, during the decades that I kind of hung out and hid out in the back country of Yellowstone, I, you know, in the early 70s and throughout the 70s, the grizzlies really were in trouble in Yellowstone. I mean, even a wacko vet, you know, living in the wilderness could tell something was wrong. You know, when the Park Service closed the dumps abruptly, as predicted, the bears went into town sites and garbage dumps, and they got killed. According to Frank Craighead, like 272 were killed in the Yellowstone ecosystem in like a 5-year period. And, you know, that's a hell of a lot of bears. And, you know, so I didn't see bears. I'd lug my movie camera in there. If it was spring, I'd set up in a place because the spring snows are, you know, 3 or 4 feet, and once the crust melts, you know, you can't stay on top of snowshoes. You just wallow. It takes you, you know, like 4 hours to go 150 feet, you know, falling down, climb up, fall through again. So you find a good place and set up. And sometimes I didn't see a grizzly for a whole week, but the bison were always there, you know, the buffalo. And, you know, you've heard the stories of the 60 million bison that ranged the plains. Well, you know, I think that's a rough count, but by any measure, a hell of a lot of bison. By 1902, there's only 23 wild bison left in the world. And those were 23 bison they couldn't catch in Pelican Valley in Yellowstone National Park. And so, you know, today's herd are the great-great-grandchildren, the descendants of those 23 animals, and that kinship always gave me great pleasure. And I sort of hung out with a herd of bull bison, and because they wintered in the same place, and it was a place that grizzlies would come through because they eat carcasses in the spring. And, you know, these bull bison would die of old age, and the grizzlies would feed on them. And bison, like elephants, have a ceremony of the dead where, you know, a bison, a member of the herd dies, usually winter killed. They come over and, you know, they rub the dead brother and lick a little hair off. And so I collected those skulls because otherwise they'd probably disappear. The Park Service they send rangers in to smash them with sledgehammers. The reason being, quote unquote, so the people don't get them. And so I you know, I didn't like that. So I would take these buffalo brothers year after year as they died and put them in a circle way back in the woods. And, that first one was about 40 years ago, and I added to it until there was, a dozen buffalo skulls and 2 or 3 grizzly skulls all in a circle facing earth. And so, I'll just read this very short piece. So I found, there was a buffalo that a grizzly had been wallowing in, and I thought he should rejoin the bull herd of about a dozen bison with which he had spent his adult life. I had been looking after this herd for years and stashed other skulls when bulls died during hard winters. He would join his buddies in a semicircle of 4 bison skulls, that was in the early days, facing the rising sun. A mile away, hidden where they would never be discovered, below trees and under the snow, I brought together a ghost herd of bison skulls, decorated with the feathers of crane and eagle, the recipients of bundles of sage and handfuls of earth carried in from sacred mountains and offered up in private ceremonies. And those little sites are really important to me. I tend to go to them and visit them every year, and then I'll take an offering. I might take a glycymera shell from the Sea of Cortez, or, a tiny potsherd from Chaco Canyon. I'm just checking our time. 'Cause you guys know that, towards the end we got to fill these out and, pass them over and stuff like that. So I got to get everything on my list here. Every year, before my children were old enough to know what Christmas was, I would take a 10-day solo hike by myself across the driest, loneliest desert of southwestern Arizona, right on the Mexican border. And, in those days, we didn't have the border problem, and I wouldn't see a human footprint for 10 days. And I would go out there, and it took me about 9 days to get across. But one day out there, again, I maintained a little cairn, a little sacred site. And I'd stop for a day, and I'd fast, and, I would, let's see, just trying to find a page here. Anyway, I come this little hill, that's out in the middle of absolutely no place. And on the top of the little hill is a little pile of boulders. Standing on the crest of the ridge, I faced a great crescent of stone. On the western end of the ridge was a pile of boulders about 5 feet tall, obviously man-constructed. I built it. I walked along the ridge to the cairn, feeling the morning sun on my back. As far as the eye could see were chunks of empty land, great valleys, ranges, desert hills, fossilized sand dunes, and crumpled flows of black lava. Nothing moved save the faint wind. Far below, along the course of the wash, came the weak warble out of a phainopepla. I sorted through the pack, finding 2 small bundles of coarse black hair, a handful of wilted desert marigold, and the bleached, flat-nosed skull of a large bighorn sheep. I laid everything out together and sat cross-legged next to the circles of stone. The cairn was my memorial, a monument I had built to my dead, to those I had loved and lost. One would think that war would have toughened me to loss, but it somehow exposed raw nerve ends. I handled death poorly. Each winter, I have to walk out here and leave it behind in that pile of rocks. The sun climbed high in the southern sky, and 3 ravens flapped and glided along the arc of rock. I kept my vigil over the pieces of rock and bone, mourning my dead. I blinked back a well of tears. The ravens croaked. I settled back into the present feeling, exiled, as with Vietnam, from those who went before me. My list of bad men was long. I wanted to fill my pockets with those black rocks and never leave the earth. Okay. Can't remember. Anyway, I started filming grizzlies full time about 1975, and but I too, needed a job, and I got my occupational advice from Edward Abbey, who advised me. He said, "Douglas, you should apply for a seasonal job with the National Park Service. They give you a quitting date to look forward to." And so I did, and I was a backcountry ranger in the North Cascades and a climbing ranger. I was one of the worst rangers in the history of the Park Service. I mean, I was awful. Anarchists make lousy law enforcement agents. In 3 years, the only thing I busted was an illegally parked Winnebago, Anyway, and of course there weren't any grizzlies in the North Cascades. Oh, there's rumors of one or two now. But anyway, I had to move to Glacier, and within the Department of Interior, I was sort of downwardly mobile, and I kept taking progressively lower-paying jobs with less responsibility. I was a fire lookout, in Glacier Park, and when I worked my way down to GS0, I retired forever from the Department of Interior, to the great relief of the National Park Service, I might add. One thing that really it really got me excited, hanging out with those vets down on the Canyonlands of Utah, is how eager they are to, Ed Abbey noticed, in his fictional character Hayduk, he really nailed the post-traumatic stress stuff. I mean, there wasn't even a name for that stuff yet, we didn't, I suppose like every other vet, I thought I was the only one, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. But, Abbey really nailed it, and he saw all that, all that great anger. He said, like Achilles, that great anger. And, useful training going to waste. And he had ideas of how to use it. And I have some ideas for these incredibly talented generation of warriors coming back from our, well, we got more wars going on now, but they're back from deployments in the Middle East of one kind or another. Some are still going to go back again, and others are probably done with it. But we've all shared kind of a similar. I've just always called my my problems just war sickness, and and these guys and women, clearly understand this is not something you just go check into the VA and get a little counseling and come back like an antibiotic. These are the kinds of wounds that never quite mend, and maybe the best thing you can do is turn it into a offensive weapon for good. And I'm going to read from this whole book. It's about Ed Abbey. It's about my own war sickness. It's about a lot of different things. It's very hard. I wrote this over 10 years, and I published, I think I probably wrote 600 pages and only published 2. It was really hard for me to let go of for some reason. But I did it because a friend on a deathbed read it, and he said, Doug, you got to publish it. Other vets are going to need it. So I'm going to read a little bit. Let's see what I'm going to read here. This is not all nice stuff, okay? This is my own life. I got divorced, and I got. I'll just read this paragraph. The next day, my soon-to-be ex-wife invited me over to my ex-home at a specific time to pick up some things. I poked about for camping gear inside the storage until she called down saying there was something I should see in the house. I walked through the back door. The front door was ajar. My wife was hurrying the children down the hallway to the back bedroom to lock them in there. And I heard the door close. The lock clicked shut. I heard a noise outside and looked out. A burly deputy sheriff stepped from behind the Palo Verde tree and stepped to the door. His hands were hidden behind his back. He reached out with his left arm and handed me papers, telling me I was served and he was sure sorry to have to do this to me. Anyway, I got in my pickup. I was staying downtown in an empty adobe house in the old barrio of Tucson that belonged to the agent of my friend Jim Harrison. And the old adobe had a tiled floor under a high ceiling and was sparsely furnished. I poured a whiskey and sat on the floor with my back to a wall. After a while, I thought I heard something heavy on the roof. I went into the fenced-in backyard for a look. It was dark. Someone was running down the alley. I climbed over a wooden gate and began to chase the sound down the alley. The next thing I remember is finding myself naked, squatting in the corner of a room with a cocked automatic pistol in my hand. I was cold and sweating at the same time. The scene was familiar. I thought it might be at Bateau in Quang Ngai Province, at the house of a Montagnard commander of the province regional force. It was Ted again. I didn't know where I was. And, I thought I was doing pretty good. And these things would just come out of the woods and grab me. It was hard to acknowledge that my behavior may have shifted beyond my control, but I couldn't deny there had already been serious consequences. It was a slippery slope, an area of my life I'm never quite comfortable sharing, but of course it's right there every day. Shards of memory were etched in a notebook. At night I drove out in the desert, loaded pistol under the seat, drink in hand, driving the dirt tracks for hours until the alcohol pushed me towards troubled sleep. My dreams were all nightmares, during which armed enemies hunted me while I fumbled bullets, unable to run away or fly away. 3 hours of restless slumber was my nightly average. An unshakable sadness shrouded my entire days. Depression stripped me of my sense of humor and reduced the volume of my voice by half. During those weeks, I met an invisible friend with whom I'd spoke Vietnamese on 4 different occasions. I craved a crack of insight into this darkness. And I went back to Ed Abbey and then to other sources. And eventually I was led to and I just needed a crack of insight into what was happening with me, and at the same time, my the diagnosis of total and permanent disability kind of arrived in the mail. So I'm just going to read this and tell you where I did find some comfort. I believe the conventional interpretation of this disability, chronic adaptive disorder, misleading. Those few story nuggets my uncles who fought in World War II shared with me have informed and stayed with me throughout the years. There is great need for the knowledge and the journey of modern men of war. And, as every warrior should know, within the traumatic memory of war and violence, which the soldier often initially avoids, there resides an invitation for change. Here's an opportunity to cross back from the domain of the shaman to the human world with the story of the journey and the knowledge it contains. Total and permanent impairment could be seen as a modern metaphorical equivalent of bestowing death eyes, which would have been a great honor in shamanistic culture. Disabled vets might wear the invisible tattooing as a mark of distinction, a ritual scarification denoting your changed status, as a warning to others that you've traveled beyond. In tribal shamanistic culture, when someone came back and had traveled beyond, as a warning to the rest of the community or the tribe. You know, he's often ritually scarified to denote his changed status. Whether acquired through war or some other trial and peril, the idea of death eyes means to see with complete objectivity, like the eye of nature, to see not good or evil, but what is there prior to any judgment. Such refined perception is needed today to confront the reality of our world, a terrible reality from which we would like to turn away or spruce up, pretend it's not happening. The notion of death eyes, or seeing with the eyes of death, though largely uncharted territory in our culture, survives from the pre-literate as myth. Terry Tempest Williams and my sister Phyllis guided me to a Sumerian tale, Descent of the Goddess. Recorded on clay tablets in the 3rd millennium BC, these poems tell of the descent and subsequent return of the goddess of heaven and earth into the underground to encounter her dark sister. This version is the oldest known of many such myths. All lie solidly in the realm of the feminine. No accident. I hesitated at first to force a comparison with men at war, but the imagery was compelling. War is also the story of initiation. Soldiers often return with death eyes. These may be the eyes of depression, to which all life looks dead, or the eyes of anger and withdrawal. Like the initial return of the goddess, it can be demonic and wrathful. Though ultimately this explosive negativity stands for life, her return from the underground first unfolds very much like the classic PTSD symptoms of the returning veteran. This is not, I submit, a condition addressed by anger management classes. The warrior has faced fear and an adversary too powerful. The soul flees. The instinct at the onset is to hide out from life until the opportunity arises to be reborn into a more merciful borderland. Meanwhile, the damaged spirit descends back into the painful refuge of the underground. In war, as in myth, no mortal can look at the naked face of reality and escape unscathed. Innocence becomes impossible. It remains for men to complete this passage. The dark wisdom is absolutely relevant, a perfect time for all warriors, men as well as women, to return, if they can endure it, with the story of their journey. You know, I'm not going to have time to talk too much about this, but this is really part of the original origin myth. I mean, Native peoples have their own. This is the one that's pieced together with Western science, and it tracks the origins of the first people to come up into the Americas. And I'm just going to read the first page from this and tell you why I wrote this book. I mean, what an incredible time. You know, I'm talking about the late Pleistocene. Okay, for the past 12,000 years, the world has enjoyed a relatively stable climate. Now, the time of predictable global weather has ended. The future will be unsettled, probably fiery, and likely terrifying. Forces have been unleashed that threaten the future of our children. The early consequences of global warming have already settled over much of the planet. Has this kind of climate change ever challenged humans before? That was my question. I didn't want to write a book directly about global warming because it's a bummer story. The question I asked is, had it ever happened to humans before? And it did. You know, 13,000 years ago, there was a paleo extinction, the whole 9 yards. Anyway, so I wrote about that. It certainly has. Most recently, right here in North America, when people first colonized this continent. About 15,000 years ago, the weather began to warm, melting the huge glaciers of the late Pleistocene that calved off its icebergs and caused the oceans to rise. The Americas were probably uninhabited by people then, but teeming with gigantic and fierce animals, many capable of killing and eating human beings. In this brand new landscape, the largest of all unoccupied wilderness regions humans would ever explore on Earth, people somehow adapted to unfamiliar habitats and dangerous creatures in the midst of a wildly fluctuating climate. And they made it through. Along the trail of the first migration into the Americas lie challenging illustrations of courage, caution, for modern people. Though the rough outline of this journey is delineated by modern science, what drew me into the wild heart of the first American story was the adventure, the exploration, the danger, wondering what it would be like to live with huge pack-hunting lions, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and gigantic short-faced bear. That gigantic short-faced bear, I think, is what really impeded colonization of the land below the glaciers. Until that beast went away, you know. Anyway, it's all in here, you know. Anyway, short-faced bears, wow. I mean, it stood 7 feet at the hip, would stand with flaring nostrils, 15 feet high, probably could smell like a wolverine, a carcass 20 miles away. You know, if you were a mammoth hunter, how would you secure your kill in open country? Anyway, stuff like that. Okay, where was I? Yes. To hunt now extinct horses, camels, and mammoth. To top a ridge somewhere in what would become Alaska and look out at unending wild country that encompassed 2 continents uninhabited by humans. It was the first and only time since Adam and Eve emerged from Eden that our species would come into so vast a land, a wilderness, 5 times the area of Australia, and never before glimpsed by an upright primate. Here lived beasts, both fierce and wonderful. Some species had not previously encountered people, including a number of predators. I can't think of a richer, wilder, more perilous time to live. For a person like myself who loves wilderness, this time in America had to be the ultimate journey. Heroic, bold adventures, facing down danger at every bend of the river, surviving against impossible odds. Of course, they didn't think of themselves like that. Hey, Chuck, why don't we show some bear footage? I'm just going to check the time here so I don't... 6 minutes or 12 minutes? 12, 13, okay, man, and then I'll be quick. I'll cut it off. Oh, and this, you know, this is just work footage I spliced together. It's not a movie or anything, but you know, this is the reality. This is what, you know, sometime I wrote in one of my books, these grizzlies saved my life. And, you know, oh, that bear doesn't know I'm there yet, but her cub does. And the, you know, the cub is telling the mom, there's a geek with a camera over there. And, you know, and so since I'm caught in the open on this open hillside, you know, I just keep the camera running so I've got a record in living color of the bear that's about to chew my ass off. Oh, and that's what you'd like to see, bear tushes bouncing away through the bear grass. A good resolution of an encounter with bears. You know, bears, you don't look straight at bears. Not 1 out of 100 grizzlies would do that. And what it means is, Peacock, get the hell off my mountain. You know, that frontal orientation. So, and I did. And bears eat a lot of grass, of course, including berries and almost everything else. And when you can't get fresh grass, you just rip up a tree to get at it here. Some of this footage, actually, this footage comes from all over the place, but you know, this comes from up in Glacier, you know, on the edge of Glacier, a place that I bushwhacked up to a long time ago, and I saw this bear when he was 4.5 years old, you know, soaking in a little tarn, a little pond. And I watched that guy for 17 years. And you know, at the culmination of this little strip of film footage, you get to see him as an adult, and he's the goofiest bear I've ever known in my life. I called him Happy Bear. You know, this is. These grizzlies are crowded into this area. Like this year was an incredible berry year, and this is the berry place. And when there's lots of food around, you know, their sociability, you know, grows. Their mutual intolerance breaks down. You know, whether it's a salmon stream, or just you know, a lot of huckleberries. You know, they don't crowd in next to each other. But, you know, you can look in the basin and you can see grizzly family over here and a big boar down there and another pair of subadults up at the side of the hill. And so, you know, it's hard to adult it's hard to sex adult grizzlies, and this is not a very dignified shot, but you could probably sex that grizzly. I'm going to avert my eyes. This is the Bitter Creek Grizz in grizzly years. That's a lie. He's the astringent Creek Grizz. I changed the names to protect the untrammeled, you know. And that bear was the greatest predator I knew in Yellowstone. I mean, he was obviously a survivor from the dump closures when so many dominant bears got killed, and he actually set up an ambush for me one night. I'd walked in on snowshoes to the thermal area, and I saw this bear, and, you know, it was getting dusk, and this bear, you know, turned and walked out on my snowshoe tracks and back onto the snow, which is like 4 feet deep. You know, you can see this is a thermal area, so the ground is warm. That's why there's no snow there. And, you know, and I started to follow him, and I got some uneasy feeling and quit and put up, you know, camp for the night. Next morning, I followed the tracks out, and he'd gone about 200 feet, made a little tight circle, and bedded behind a log next to my snowshoe trail. And the bed was icy, so he'd been there a while. I don't know what that means. You know, maybe he was just curious. Anyway, here's one of the bison that have joined that, you know, the circle of bison skulls, which did get scorched by a forest fire. That doesn't matter. The power of the bison is still there. Anyway, it's like your dog rolling in a dead salmon. They really like to get all that good stuff all over them. And, you know, it's an old, you can see old projector splices, and they jump, crap like that. This grizzly actually walked, I spent a week looking for her, and I spent a day with her, and the wind shifted, and she walked right up on me. And at one point, I don't know what she was going to do. This is the grizzly that I knew had seen other people. She was up near Granite Park Chalet, you know, up and down in Bear Valley. But I couldn't even focus on her. I had to stop and talk to her because she was coming right at me. And then she turned around and pretended to dig. You know, this is like displacement behavior, you know, like a response inappropriate to stimulus. Anyway, boy, there was a good bear year this year, you know. I'd say all of those bears I saw up there on the east side and west side had just huge berries. And if I were a bear, it was cold enough up there, I might think about, you know, retiring early. You know, the thing that triggers hibernation in grizzly is, you know, the size of the fat cell. And, boy, these guys really laid it in this year, and they could probably go in early. It's a different story in Yellowstone, and I'm not going to have time, but the government is trying to strip Yellowstone's grizzlies of all protections under the Endangered Species Act and turn management over to the states. Management by the states means hunting licenses. Wyoming has said they want to put out 60 permits. And if Montana and Idaho do that, the natural mortality of grizzlies in Yellowstone is about 150. I mean, it doesn't take a weatherman, doesn't take, you know, a biology degree to figure those odds. 250 dead grizzlies out of an island, you know, ecosystem, an isolated population of bears. And the grizzlies, of course, along with musk ox and polar bears, are some of the, you know, the lowest reproducing land mammals we have. This bear smells another male grizzly in this basin, and she's worried about her cubs. And she can't quite place him, but, you know, there's all this mythology about grizzlies not being able to run uphill or not being able to run downhill. I forget what it is. Well, that's all crap. It's just utter horse, you know what. And, you know, they can go up or down, and, you know, those are huge downfalls. Now she's running back down. You know, that's avalanche logs, you know, from a snow patch. And, of course, they love to play. Anytime they get any leisure, grizzlies will play. And cubs play with each other. Mothers play with young. Brothers play with sisters. And grizzlies just play all by themselves sometimes. Anyway, a little shallow pond up there in the hot summer days. You know, if you had a 70-pound fur coat on, you'd probably want to take a dip too. But it brings out a lot of play. I quit filming and photographing grizzlies abruptly about in the early 80s. And, you know, you go to a wild place like this. There's no trails up there, okay? Nobody goes up there. It's such a wild place. I make wild places less wild by my presence. So it's a trade-off. I'm also, advertising grizzlies by, being on national TV and stuff like that. So I imagine, I'm doing them a little bit of good. Watch this overhand right, man. Play gets rough. Whoa. That's a brother and sister there, and the wind blowing across the water. But, you never know when you're treading too heavily. So in the early 80s, I said, maybe I'm treading too heavily, and I just quit. But I still do everything I can to, my job for the rest of my life is defending wilderness and animals like grizzlies and wolverines. I co-founded an organization in 1991, Round River Conservation Studies. We work with Native peoples to create wilderness areas, like in British Columbia, Namibia, Cedar Mesa, South America, whatever. We're approaching 25 million acres, and that's just a very small organization, medium-sized organization. And you look at a blank map, and if there's not a national park there, probably traditional people live there. And by working with those people, sorry about all this crap. Someday I should fix this, but I've been showing it for about 20 years, and I never get around to it, Say, you need a couple of minutes. Anyway, this is one of my favorite bears here. This is Happy Bear, the one that I've been watching for 15 years, He's just a goofy bear. He's just a wonderful bear, and he plays all by himself. Whoops. And once I saw him, with a 6-foot lodgepole, stick, rubbing the back of his neck with his paws. And, that's a tool using grizzlies. They ain't supposed to be able to do that. Anyway, he's a really smart, wonderful bear. And he likes to beat the ice. I think he looks at his reflection some mornings. Yeah, then we're doing fine. Anyway. So, and anyway, fighting Yellowstone delisting, I'm going to need some help with that. So I will have the word out by the end of the month. And it's just like the wolverine that was announced today. We're going to have to go to court to sue the Federal Wildlife Service. They don't believe in global warming. And other things, and anyway, come on, Happy Bear. You can't break the ice enough. Come on. You can watch his open mouth. He's just really relaxed and joyful. And see, up in that slab of snow, there's other bears, so he's smelling other bears. And all grizzlies know, do they know every other grizzly? They're more social than anybody gives them credit for, or most people anyway. He knows which bears to dominate and which bears to run away from. And up in here, there's a lot of bear poop on this little piece of snow up here. And, he can tell by the smell what bear dropped the scat, as we call in the business, And look at him, just leap for joy, grizzly bear. Oh, there's a big pile that's a huge pile of bear poop. Could that be Jack? Oh, no. Anyway, so he's going along here, and there's another pile of bear poop, big, heavy bear poop. And again, he knows exactly who this is. Huh? It's Bud. Oh, no. Yet. Anyway, you put that on your computer. Hey, Chuck, I'm gonna close it out here and answer a few questions. Let me just move this out. One last thing. Talking about We got so much junk here. Let's see. Okay. I could tell a story too. It's a story about ceremony, and it's a story about Ed Abbey. Okay? Ed Abbey, you know, was a close friend of mine for 20 years, and he had left instructions for his, you know, for his burial and for his wake, and you know, the least you can do is, you know, honor a friend's last wishes, especially if they're illegal as hell. Anyway, here, let me read this. The last time Ed Abbey smiled was when I told him where he was going to be buried. And I smile too when I think of this small favor, the simple last task friends can do for one another. The rudimentary shovel work, the sweaty labor consummating trust, finally testing the exact confirmation by lying down in a freshly dug grave to check out the view. It was good, you know, and I laid down there for a few minutes in the great view, and then all of a sudden I started to see turkey vultures. Now, Ed wanted to be reincarnated as a buzzard, you know, so anyway, here. And then receiving a sign. 7 buzzards, soaring above, joined by 3 others, all 10 banking over the volcanic rubble and riding the thermal up the flank of the mountain, gliding out over the distant valley. Even 20 years later, I grin as I crest a ridge above its grave. The earth falls away, and mountain ranges stretch off into the great distance as far as the eye can see. Excuse me. There's not a human sign or sound, only a faint desert breeze stirring the blossoms of brittlebush. We should be so lucky. On the eve of March 16th, I journeyed to the edge of this desert place. March 16th is my Day of the Dead. It's the anniversary of the My Lai massacre, and my last day in the field in Vietnam, I was ordered out of the field. Helicopter picked me up. We flew out to the coast, you know, up in what used to be the northern part of South Vietnam, and we got shot at going up the coast, which is no big deal. You get shot at it all the time, but I looked down there and I recognized the place, and it was My Lai, and it was going on then. I didn't know that till a year later when I saw those pictures in Life magazine. Those pictures changed my life forever. Anyway, it's also the same day, March 16th, my Day of the Dead. And it's also the day in 1989, 3 friends and myself buried Ed Abbey here, illegally, in accordance with his last wishes. I had traveled out here alone to Ed's grave, bearing little gifts, including a bottle of mezcal and a bowl of pozole verde I had made myself. I'm a good cook. I sat quietly on the black volcanic rocks, listening to the desert silence, pouring mezcal over the grave and down my throat until the moon came up an hour or so before midnight. Suddenly, I heard a commotion to the south in the dark. The roar of basaltic scree thundering down the slope opposite me. A large, solitary animal was headed my way. I got the hell out of there. 2 days later, I told the story of the bighorn desert ram I heard, but never saw, to my friend Jim Harrison. Jim's from Michigan. He talks like that. Well, dog, Jim said, maybe it was old Ed. Thank you. Would anybody have any questions or comments? Yes. Yeah, not, you know, not a lot, no, but I know of it. I haven't done it. I'm out there, you know, checking the bear tracks too much.
My ex-husband does work with meditation, and he combines meditation and the wilderness.
Oh, that's great.
I was looking at TM, and I've just seen, I've read, I haven't experienced it myself, but I've read great success with.
Yeah, you know, that's as close as I get to meditation sometimes, is when I go out there and sit for a day and fast. You know, but I do it with some structure. It's just that I'm such a loner. That's, you know, most of my trips into the wilderness have been solitary, and you know, it's not for everybody, but solitude is deep as well, I know, and you know, you might try it sometime. Jack.
What was your take on, was it Timothy Treadwell?
Yeah.
You had met him.
Yes, you know, Timothy came to see me in the very beginning after his first year, you know, spent an afternoon with me in Tucson. I think he probably wanted my approval, and I gave him all the right advice. He listened to part of it. Anything else about that, Jack? Did you want to know my hit on it, or?
What, were you, what, yeah, I was wondering, because he did receive a lot of public acclamation, and, you know, it was, yeah, I was just wondering if you had a take on it. In other words, the advice you gave him that he did not take might have saved his life.
Yeah, well, it might have, but you know, Timothy, you know, there couldn't be 2 or 3 Timothy Treadwells in the world. I mean, you know, that kind of, you know, being on a you know, it's on the southern Alaska Peninsula there, you know, and you know, those are bears that feed on salmon, and they're, you know, they're very, very social. A sow, a mother grizzly, will leave her cubs with you, sitting right next to you while she goes and gets salmon, because that, you know, because the one bear one thing she's afraid of is a big boar, not a human, and but you know, it's like, you know, they treat us pretty much the same way. That mutual antagonism breaks down with abundant food, and it comes right back when the food is gone. And you know, there was a great filmmaker, but a lousy film was, you know, Werner Herzog, you know, did Grizzly Man, and you know, and he hangs on. Timothy was out there to make movies for, you know, he's out, and he'd do different takes on himself talking to the camera. And Werner would hang on those shots 4 or 5 seconds too long, really uncomfortable. And just so he could stand up in the end and say, I don't see no cutesy grizzly bears out there. All I see is a cold, indifferent face of nature, you know? And that's why I didn't like that film much. And what, you know, people came down really hard on Timothy Treadwell because he got himself killed and eaten. And I would say I come down on him because the woman who was with him was just with him because she loved him, and she didn't need to be there, you know. And you know, people have, you know, people don't like me saying this, but you know, they thought it was the most horrible thing that those people were careless enough to get themselves killed and eaten. But they were, you know, educated adult people who knew the risks. They knew what they're doing, you know. Instead of, you know, blaming them for, you know, some kind of publicity demise, we might admire them for their courage. That's what I think. Yeah. Ma'am.
When you were filming those bears, how often were the bears aware that you were there?
You can pretty much tell. You know, the ones that are real close to me, and the mother with her cub, those bears knew I was there. The other bears largely did not. I mean, my goal was to go out with a movie camera, film grizzlies, and never have the grizz know I was there. That was perfect. I screwed up lots of times. I mean, I started out with a spring-wound Bolex. It's noisy as hell. The only way, you know, you could approach a wild grizzly is be, you know, on a windy day, way downwind, you know, but, you know, that was my intention, and you can pretty much see. I filmed a lot of those grizzlies in the water from a ridge above, where the wind blew my scent away, and the camera, I made a deal with ABC Sports. I went out and did a American Sportsman segment with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who would say, well, Peacock, there's the bears, you know, and we were in Yellowstone, and he'd say, well, Peacock, you mean the hot spring just over there, just steaming away then? And anyway, In exchange for doing the American Sportsman thing, I got to use one of their Eclair movie cameras that didn't make any noise. So, you know, once I got my hands on that, I could get a lot closer. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming. And Andrea's got some books. I'll be glad to sign them. And just, it's just such a beautiful time of year. Thanks so much.